Well, here we go. Hello and welcome. I'm back. It's just me tonight, and we're going to be having a bit of a hobby session. So, usual stuff. Everybody can say hello on the chat, all that kind of thing. Ask a bunch of questions. But tonight's session is essentially going to be about trying to discover a super quick way of painting my Tzeentch battleline. So, let's give a bit of background on this before we go too far. I've been working on a Tzeentchian Beast of Chaos army, which pretty much every single model, I think every single model in the army is converted. Oh, I can't believe I've just said that, and I think it's true. Oh wait, yeah, okay, no, there's a unit of Tzaangors which are good to go as they are, because to be honest, I love the model. Right, what does that mean though? Well, that means I've got in excess of 80 Ungors that need painting rather rapidly. Yes, of course, I'm going to go back and take my time on some of the other models. Dip them in iodine, says Coleman. I'm going to go back and take my time on things like characters and some of the bigger units and those kind of things, because in my army I've got Dragon Ogre Shagoff, custom Dragon Ogres, custom Doom Bull, converted Beast Lord. Everything's converted into, including the Tuskor chariots. What I might do if I get time in tonight's show is kind of go through some of those units, but it's not really what the show's about tonight. Tonight we are going to be faffing around with tons and tons of contrast paints and to see if we can get an effective colour scheme done so I can get the 80 Ungors done. I'm not planning on doing them completely in contrast colours, but I'll be laying, for want of a better word, base, mid and highlight, I would say. Base, mid and shadow, which is kind of what contrasts do really. But I think if you want to bring back the highlights or bring some texture into some of the colours, then you do need to kind of go back to some of the other techniques. And one of the fastest one for fur, for instance, a good example of that will be, say, hitting them with a bit of dry brush just to bring up the very top edges of the fur that goes on the Ungor legs. But likewise, you know, things like cloth or muscle fibre, if you want to bring some sort of texture back into the arms and those kind of things, then I'll punch back through with a few highlights later. But that's not what tonight's show's about. Tonight's show is about kind of mixing the contrasts up, trying them with different levels of medium. It's not my first time using contrasts, so I'll be kind of watering some of them down, trying them at different colours, see what I can achieve, and see if I can kind of come up with a Tzeentchian colour scheme. I'm not going straight into my models straight away. What I'm going to is to make a mess of these little fellas here. So I've got a unit of 5 or 6 of these little Nurgle dudes. No, they don't really have fur texture, but there's enough going on them for me to kind of work out how the contrast is going to react to different textures. What I've also got in front of me is 10 of my wonderful little tiny converted Ungors, and as you can see, they're a combination of Ungor, and in fact, actually, that's a great example. So why don't we cut to this camera and maybe zoom in a bit. So here we've got an Ungor, and as you can see, is an Ungor bottom, Ungor legs, but he's using an Acolyte, Tzeentchian Acolyte, upper torso, except for Ungor lower arm, and Ungor arm for the bow. But they've still got the sort of human-looking head, but in an attempt to appear more Tzeentchian, he's stuck his little armoured beak on, and as you can see, he's got an arrow pack on the back there as well. So there's one example of an Ungor raider, and here we have the standard Ungor with sword and half shield. So as you can see, you kind of get the idea, don't you? So I want to mess around with a few different schemes. Of course, the armour will be picked out separately, but I just kind of want to see what I can achieve. And I've got some kind of big fundamental questions to start with first, which is, I suppose in many respects, what do I want to do in terms of how they look? Do I go all blue and pinks and purples? Bear in mind I can't see purple, so it's always a challenge. Or do I kind of, with it being Beasts of Chaos, have a random motley of colours? And right now I'm undecided, which is why I want to do some test models. I like the idea, for instance, of my upper torsos to have some flesh tone still in them. I don't just want them to be blue fleshed, you know, and I think one of the really nice sort of flesh colours is the dark oath flesh colour. I think that's quite nice, so I'm going to try a couple with those. And again, it's going to be a bit weird to start with because I'm just going to be hitting Nurgle models just to see how well the colours blend into each other and how they work, and kind of talking through the process really. Other than that, we'll be keeping up with people on the chat. So if people are there and want to say hello or ask questions or make suggestions, please do. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Other than that, I think this is sort of a final wet test of the new setup as well, because as you can see, I've messed around with the camera a little bit now, so we haven't got all that weird kind of contrast shift and changing and stuff that we've got going off last time, which was a bit strange. I've messed around with the audio a bit, so hopefully that's a bit better. Again, I'm looking for feedback. And the system setup is a little bit more organized. So that means, well, it really affects me more than you, but it means at least we can broadcast much quickly, or much easily, should I say. Easier? Oh my god, I'm not really talking English tonight, am I? And also, there's a microphone there, which I forgot to actually bring closer, so hopefully you can still hear me okay. So we're good, I think. We're good. We're set up. We're nice and relaxed. We're going to have a chat and do a bit of hobby, talk about models, and see where we go from there. What I want to do is I want to start by talking about this fellow. So this is one of 4 crazy looking dudes I made. He lost his tongue recently, which is a shame. So as you can see, this was my Chaos Spawn, my Tzeentchian Chaos Spawn. And, you know, prizes to anybody who can actually guess what this model is made out of. Because there's a whole bunch of models going off in there, but basically, predominantly 1 or 2. You know what? Look at that. You can pretty much guess. There's a head swap going off, and there's a few extra arms in there. As you can see, there's extra arms tucked away underneath the wings there. I love this arm that's just reaching behind going peekaboo. So this was my Chaos Spawn model that was done for a recent doubles tournament in which I entered with the wonderful Dan, and despite going 5-0 on our wins, we didn't get enough of the soft scores to get us onto the podium, but never mind, we still had 5 rather traumatic and exciting games. But this was the colour scheme, and you know, in my mind this is kind of a classic kind of Tzeentchian colour scheme, which is like the blues and what I believe to be purple, but somebody's told me since it's a little bit more pink than purple, Phil, but you know, I'm not fantastic at keeping up on those things. Right, okay, so this is what I'm basing, if you like, this is where my Tzeentch army starts from. It starts from this model. So I think you get an idea of, for instance, if I was going to do my Doom Ball or something like that, then I think you're going to see this kind of colour scheme. So anything that's kind of a little bit more involved and demon-esque, should we say, then that's where I'm going with it. And you'll see, you know, the Zangors are probably going to be in, you know, this blue with this coloured stuff. So that's the predominant colour scheme of the army. But as I said, when it comes to the Ungors, I want to kind of, you know, introduce maybe a more random, motley, change-ridden look to it, rather than this being a complete uniform army of everything in blue. So that's the challenge that I'm faced with, that we're going to be playing with a bit. We've got our palette set up. We've got a whole bunch of contrast paints ready to go. And I've faffed around with some of the schemes, which I'm going to talk about next. And then we're going to start actually splashing some paint on the model. So I'm going to keep this handy, by the way, because I think it's always good to have a reminder nearby of what it is you're trying to do. So he's up by you. In fact, I'm going to present the rest of the show to him. Or her. A gender in specific Chaos Spawn. I'm pretty certain there's no bits hanging anywhere. So, right. What have we got going off on the chat? Let's say hello. We've got Coleman in there. I'm assuming everything is working good, because there's no complaints in the chat about sound, audio, and imagery not working, other than the wonderful advice to dip them in iodine. Demon Lizard from Outer Space joining us, saying hello, nerds, and just joined. Is that a Chaos Spawn? It is indeed a Chaos Spawn. Just chatting about him, but he's gone. He's the base of my colour scheme for my new Tzeentchian dudes, and it looks amazing. Thank you very much. What I have got, by the way, is quite a sore throat today, so I am going to be having a sip of this every now and then, just to keep my my vocal cords working throughout the show. Okay, where are we at? Well, let's talk about some of the groups of colours really that I was kind of hinting to. And in fact, actually, before we go there, 2 seconds, because I've just noticed one last setup cut there. Let's try that. See if that works any better. I'm gonna work any. Ah, look, we're fading now and not cutting. I'm happier with that. One of the reference points we had was, or at least I had, was Stephen Cranston's Beast of Chaos. I don't know Stephen. I'm sure he's an absolutely lovely fellow, and he's done an absolutely beautiful Beast of Chaos army. There's a lot of Tzeentch-inspired painting scheme, you know, something truly spectacular. I've had a look at these because I think this is a good reference point for me. So what am I talking about really? I suppose in many respects when you look at, say, this character, you know, that's giving that kind of, you know, along the lines of what I want to achieve with my Doom Bull, I think, but I'm going to be going bluer, more like you see on the Beast of Chaos. This is an interesting shot because it kind of gives the example about how the Gauls can look, where we've got, you know, kind of very much brown fur and flesh coloured with a little bit of, you know, bringing the blue into the horn, you know, and introducing the, you know, the blue on the wood and those kind of things. I think is really effective. I quite like this grey wood, this grey blue wood. I think that's interesting. And again, going much more into the kind of purple. You know, how does that look when you oh, and there's some really nice stuff going off here as well. So we can see this slightly more mutated gore that's just going absolutely nuts. This one that's just gone balmy crazy. I'm quite sure what's happening with that fellow. He's just having a bad day, I think. And this wonderful gore here, Ungor, with the bluey skin, and then who knows what's happening to him. He's really going through a change fest, isn't he? So that leaves us with this overview shot, which unfortunately I can't zoom in on too well, but it gives you the idea. And as you can see, I think that's what I'm kind of talking about. Do I end up with this motley effect where you can see the blues kind of working their way through the unit, but you can also see the browns and the yellows and those kind of things? Do I do that for my Gauls, but then of course all my heroes and my Zangors are going to be blue? Is that a better way to go? Or do I just make everyone blue? My fear is if I make everybody blue, it's just going to be too uniform, ultimately. I think that's a great shot of the Ungors, where there's lots and lots of colour going off. So that's a good inspiration point, I think. I'm going to leave that available for me to look at as we go along. So thank you very much, Stephen, for at least applying your army to Games Workshop for photography, because it's given me a good reference point to start from. Some of the colour mixes, I'm looking at them basically. So if we work through some of the contrasts, I've got this Ethermatic blue. I thought this would work quite well as a skin, going through to this Achillean green and maybe this Leviathan blue. I'm going to mess around with those a little bit. I've got some kind of stuff here that doesn't make much sense. Maybe the Griff Charger for the flesh. I think that just goes way too blue, so I might not touch that, or if I touch it, I'll be banging a whole bunch of medium in there. This is the Dark Oak Flesh. It's one of my favourite flesh tones in there. Then if we go out the blues into the pink and purples, you have to excuse me because, as I said, I'm purple-blue colourblind, which means I really struggle to see these. They look very similar, but I know there's a difference because the labels are different. So we're going to have a mess around with those to some degree. Slightly nervous about that. And then, you know, I've got a bunch of other stuff going off here. We've got this Space Wolves grey going off. We've got the Ultramarines. Again, I think just too blue, but we can keep it on the desk for now. And then I've got a few browns and the Skeleton Horde and the Snakebite Leather and the Gorguncha Fur and the, you know, Gilliman Flesh. And they're all round at that kind of browns, you know, the brownsy, yellowsy kind of end of the spectrum. So that's kind of what I'm going with, I think. So that's what it feels like at the moment. I feel like I'm going in the right direction. I've been live 13 minutes now and we've not started painting yet, so that's got to be a good sign. You can tell I'm nervous about this. I better pick a brush really, hadn't I, and start thinking about what I'm going to use really. Maybe I should have picked a brush out before I even started. I need something with a fairly heavy bristle set, don't I? This is only messing around with contrast at this size. So what have we got? What have we got? Come on, stop faffing around, Phil. There you go, picked a brush. Ralph, you'll be pleased. This is one of those I picked up when I was visiting you in France. So there you go, one of those wonderful Raphael Kalinsky sable brushes. There you go. It'll be interesting for you to know that Luke actually used this as a dry brush recently. Anyway, it's always good having Luke round to do a bit of hobby with you. I know you're out there, Luke, so cursing me already. Well, right, I'm going to grab a couple of these Nurgle fellows. I'm going to line them up, and we're going to try a few colours, and we'll see where we go from there. How many Nurgles have I got going? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Nurgly dudes before I'm at a stage where I'm trying directly on the models. What I'd like to be at by the end of this show is to have 1 or 2 finalised schemes, possibly 3 finalised schemes for my Ungors. Because as I've said, I've got 80 of these fellows to do, so... with crazy examples like the little spearmen here, which I've actually given the axes, and more archers, for instance. And as you can see how these work out. What I really like about these is they've got that kind of real, you know, buff Tzeentchian look about them. I just like these kind of... the idea, I don't know whether you've seen the fluff on what these acolytes actually are like, but they don't start off like that. They've not all been working out. Tzeentch kind of grants them with these wonderful muscular bodies, so they can start off all skinny and everything, and then they get a boon of Tzeentch, and suddenly they're these great big hench dudes. So I kind of like the fact I've carried that through to my Gors, because really Gors are the lowest of the low. In terms of Beasts of Chaos. So I like the idea that these little fellas, look, they've been granted some boons. You know, they started off as humans, definitely, and the change cult kicked in. And, you know, so the legs have predominantly shifted. They've grown a bit of fur up their back. And, you know, other than that, the change is still yet to come to them. What I did do with some of the heroes is I changed some of the unit leaders over to have bird heads as well. So, you know, I think that'll work out all right. What I'm going to do... I'm going to start at the Dark Oath end of the range. I want to try some skin on this and see where we go from here. So I'll tell you what, let's start with 1 palette for now. Let's come Dark Oath in the end of here. I'm just going to do 2 drops of everything at the moment. I want to see how this is like. This feels really heavy before we even... yeah, this is too heavy already. I don't like that. So we're going to get a spot of medium in there, and we're going to wipe that off. And we'll make sure that you guys can see this as well in a bit. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go 50-50 on the Dark Oath at the moment, which is why I only started with a couple of drops. Because if I knew I was going to tone it down a bit, then there's no point putting a load of it in for me to then have to meet that amount with, you know, with the medium as well. So that feels more like it. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this one, because I'm going to take, if you like, the top half, and I'm kind of imagining that's the chest and upper torso. I'm going to get that going like that. I'm not really doing much at the moment, but other than... and what I want to do is I want to see whether I can kind of introduce a blue flesh into this as well. So the one I've got is this. I quite like this Aethermatic blue. It's really nice. Most of these, by the way, have been pre-mixed. If you're wondering, I'm just going straight out the dropper. I have spent the half an hour leading up into this show making sure all these have had a thorough mixture going off. Here we go. Here we go. Let's see. And I'm going to kind of like try and blend this into each other. So we've got a bit of blue skin blending into brown. I just want to see if this is even going to work. Okay, just quite like the idea of them being on uniform. Let's go with the end of the tentacle there. You get the idea of what I'm doing. I hope the camera's picking this up because it's quite subtle on even for me. But you know, the great thing about contrast is you want to strengthen it up at all, you can come back and layer it on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore the fact of the detail of this model. I'm kind of going to assume now I'm going into the fur. So if I was going to do that and take it down to the fur, then the fur is going to be some kind of blue. And what I'm going to do is, let's try this Achelian, only because I'm familiar with it. So this would be my fur. So this is going to be a challenge because I'm going to basically use this. Ah, that's too dark already. I can see that. So actually, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe not for the fur. Look at how that blends into the leg there. So maybe for the fur it's a bit of a winner. I'm going to do that on the leg there as well. And again, like I say, the actual model, this would be the Ungor leg. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a drop of this medium so I can kind of wet blend black. Let's have a go. I just want to wet blend that in a bit because it was getting a bit strong. Look, there you go. I can just using a bit of medium, dangerously going back into the medium, but you know, we're living life on the edge here. Okay. So the question is does that give me enough to be confident that that would actually work? So you can kind of see what's going off, and then, you know, bear in mind that this is really, you know what, I'd rather this dry and make a decision on it. What I'm going to do is make sure I finish off just getting some of that darking, because if that was like a dark blue fur, although it is quite green, isn't it? Okay, I think you get the idea. And again, ignore the fact that, oh, how come he's got blue legs going up to, you know, light blue legs going up to, you know, a flesh tone, because all I'm doing is seeing how well those colours blend into each other and what does it look like, and whether that works. You know, can I do, for instance, let's just compare that to an actual model I need to do. Right, here we go. So for instance, a good example would be the head and the upper torso would be in this sort of fleshy brown colour, yeah? But what I might start to do is, as you get to the stomach area, is introduce this paler blue that we get in here, this blue-green, and then when it comes to the fur on the, oh, and the pale blue might be done on the calves here, and then where this dark blue is, that would be the fur there and there, basically. I mean, I'm fairly confident to kind of say, actually, I think that works, and I could probably have a go at it against that model. But what I want to do is let it dry and see what it looks like. So while that's drying, we can experiment with a couple of other colours. So I'm just going to clean out my palette, because contrast sets like crazy in this stuff, so the quicker you get it out, the better. I'm going to leave the dark oath in because I actually want the dark oath. God, this contrast stuff is like glue. It's insane. What have we got going off in the chat? Right, so Commons. Oh, Ralph's been in and out. Hey, Ralph, how you doing? What Luke used to be? Yes, Luke did use my brush as a dry brush. Martin Dick says, woo! And Derpimus Maximus, why does he have blue legs going up to flesh tone? The warp did it. Definitely needs pink, says Martin Diggs. Well, there you go. I mean, that's the thing is, isn't you right? I mean, that feels like it's all pushing down one tone, but the good news is, look how many more of these little fellas we've got for playing around with. So I am going to follow your lead and say what happens if we go into pink. So I'll tell you what I'd like to try. I'd like to try an Ethermatic blue, because I quite like how that skin looks like that. And I am going to go into one of the pinks. Oh my goodness, you're making me choose a pink. So I'm going to go voluptuous. How about that? God knows whether this is going to work. And the quick test I need to do is just how strong are these. Very. Okay. 50% medium into the voluptuous. Oh my god. Wow. That's seriously pink. Okay, why don't we try this though? I'm wondering if the flesh into the pink. I'm having second thoughts. Let's do the flesh. The flesh into the pink. Not got much of the flesh at the moment, so I'm just going to focus on the front of the model. In fact, actually, well, that's a good idea. Why don't we do flesh on one side? Ethermatic blue on the other. Let's have a look. I'm going to need to do a bit of, I need a bit of the colour coming down, and I need a bit of that colour coming down. And those of you who are just joining in, what I'm doing with this is experimenting with colour schemes for, oh my goodness me, for my Beasts of Chaos Ungors. So these are nothing more than sacrificial models with a bit of texture on, so I can see what happens if I blend these colours into each other. How does it look? So no, these aren't Nurglings that have gone blue and pink. Well, they have, but not by design. Don't know about you guys. It's a bit strong, isn't it? Doesn't look like a fur colour, because that's what that would be in that instant. How well does it blend together? Let's just get, I need a bit of medium. Whatever I do, and I haven't really kind of fully gone into this, is, oh, that works. I really need to make sure that whatever I do, it's something that can be repeated over 80 odd models quite quickly. That definitely doesn't work. That kind of does. Let's just compare it to this as it's drying. You know, if those were in a unit coming towards you, bit of blue, bit of pink going off, I think that could kind of work. And again, I'm just going to remind everybody, this would be used on models like this. So they're not going to be used on Nurglings, they're going to be used on my Tzeentchian Ungors rather. So you can imagine that blue would be the skin, the fur at the bottom, and the skin colour would be this skin at the top. And of course that fur actually on this model kind of goes up. I'm just going to zoom right in so you've got a sense of it. The fur actually runs up the back there. So, which has been all green stuffed on and those kind of things. And what I tried to do is wherever there was a belt running, I created like a ridge in the fur. So that kind of fur has just come over the top of the belt, but when it's shaded, you will still see that ridge, so it continues the belt from the armour, was the idea, the crossover of, you know, this belt as you can see it running up into the fur. So hopefully they'll look pretty good when they get some tone on them. Right, let's see what we've got in the chat. Vaughan Killian is in there. Hey Vaughan, how you doing, man? He says, what is it? Been a while since I caught a live one. On tonight's Cooking with Phil Tzeentch and Jambalaya. Pour yourself a stiff one. And Vaughan Killian, been a while since I had a live show. Yes, lots of internet troubles. Tune into last week's if you want to know why we're here after several weeks of interrupted service, shall I say, which was all down to technology. Good news is I recycled some of that rather. You know, I said there was a pile of technology on the floor that was going to waste. The good news is I managed to recycle some of it, so it's actually created a much more powerful and faster editing machine for one of our editors, Rich. So really excited because he's in a much better place to actually get more and more editing done now as well. So the filming schedule is getting built back up, which is good news. Okay, right, where are we at? Well, you know, I always think contrast look better when it dries. I mean, because obviously it's very glossy when it's not. I think that's settling in nicely. I think you can get away with that flesh into the blue. So saturation's a bit high on this shoot, but this camera, but you're still getting the general impression of it. I don't like that. The greens, the bluey greens into pink. No, it's not working for me. The flesh into pink. Yes, I think so. I do feel like the Darko flesh needs like less shade. There's too much going off there, but we'll see what it's like when it dries. I've got a feeling it doesn't really change, but we'll see. I've still got 4 more test models to play with. So, you know, we'll kind of see what comes along on that. Here's a nice conversion for you guys while you're waiting. How about this? Do you think this works? Is it proportionally okay between the upper torso and the lower torso? I think that works. What's going up? I'm trying to think. I just want to show you an example of what the rest of the army's looking like. Hold on a second. Oh, we can talk about Old World, sure, if you want to, Mr. Killian. Let's have a look at this. Hold on a second, though. But before we do that, Let's see if we can find Dragon Ogre Shagoff at the moment, see how he's looking. So this is an example of what I'm talking about, where you would see a kind of more traditional Tzeentch colour scheme, because the feathers are going to be, you know, either blue or pink with blue and pink flesh and those kind of things. I'm really just struggling at the moment with the shoulders on this model. The weapon he's having is actually this wonderful weapon from the Varg. I can't remember the name of it now. Whatever the big beastie is, anyway. But I really like the idea of that being his kind of Tzeentchian axe. I'm going to mess around with the head so it's a little bit more unique. I think you get the idea of what my Dragon Ogre Shagoff's looking like. Lots of horns to come on the head. That's why I'm not worried about this hole at the moment. It's going to be very Zangor-esque by the time I've finished. And I think I'm going to get rid of the cloth off the back. Originally I was going to do like armor plates with cloth coming down, but I've decided the cloth's got to go. So I'll be grinding all of that off and resculpting that with a bunch of green stuff at some point. As you can see, I've started to lay a few feathers down, but it's early days. It's early days. I'm still working away on that model. Not terribly satisfied with it, but I feel like it's going in the right direction. The main issue I've been having is just getting the arms to line up. Morgeist, thank you very much. Morgast, there you go. That's where the weapon came from. I actually think the hands are okay for me to get away with, because originally I was going to kind of do a whole bunch of work getting a new pair of hands on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit them with a bit of plastic weld and just smooth off some of the knuckles and stuff, and I think I'll get away with that. So that's how that fella's looking, my big Dragon Ogre Shagoff. But as you can see, he's a bit too hench on the shoulders, so I've been working on getting rid, if anybody's familiar with a Demon Prince model, he has these big massive, I think abs is the term, don't know, those muscles down the side, pegs maybe, who knows. Anyway, ground them off. They were too much for the model because he looked too T-shaped, but I'm still left with these massive shoulders. That needs a bit of work. So that's what's going off over there. Right. While we're here then, let's have a break and have a drink. Nice silence bit for you there. Yeah, it is you're right, it's the Morgas. Thank you very much for that. Speculation time. What format is GW going to bring back the old world? It's caused a tiz, hasn't it, that one? You know, loads of people upset that the old world is gone, and then they announce it's coming back, and then they're upset it's coming back because they changed all their models over. But, you know, it's not the end of the world, because one would assume the format is going to be, you know, kind of movement trays, all square bases, so you can kind of put your round dudes back into movement trays, because that doesn't make people do two armies, one on square and one on round. Or will they? I don't think so. There's no real need to, is there? If there was a movement tray and you got 25mm rounds, it's the same as 25mm square. They just drop in, don't they? You know, I mean, admittedly, you've got to spiral your models around a little bit so they'll kind of, you know, fit with each other, but that's not the end of the world, is it? In most instances, that's going to happen because they've been quite sensible about base size with 32mm and stuff. Format of the game, who knows? It's so long off, isn't it? It's one of those weird announcements. I was half convinced that it was more about defending the intellectual property of the old world than it is about producing a game for the old world. I mean, you know, it's no secret, after Age of Sigmar was launched, a lot of fantasy players kind of launched their own version of it, the 9th Age, which was kind of like Fantasy 9th Edition, if you like. It does make you wonder that, you know, if Games Workshop aren't actively developing anything in the old world, but there is external stuff going off in the old world, like you know, some of the computer games, you know, so a lot of that was still based in Total War and stuff like that was based in the old world. It part of the cynic in me kind of said, well, they're just announcing that to essentially state to the world that the old world is still a ongoing concerns in the context of intellectual property. In other words, we are developing a game for that system. It's still current, and therefore it's far more defensible in the courts of law, even though, as most people know, one of the issues with the old world, and particularly armies like Tomb Kings or Bretonnia, is it's incredibly difficult to defend an intellectual property on something that more or less pre-existed from history one way or another. You know, Egyptian-looking mummies is not something that GW came up with the idea of. There are Egyptian-looking mummies out there in the world, and likewise with Britannia, of course, which was the kind of old, you know, heraldic knights and those kind of things. So they're difficult to defend, and I should imagine it gets even more difficult to defend if you're kind of stating this is your intellectual property, but you aren't actually developing anything in it anymore. It's just sat there, not moving forward, and it's a past part of the game. And then whilst there's references to the old world in Age of Sigmar, it's not enough to kind of make it out to be a solid requirement for the game. So that was the cynic in me that went, you know, an announcement that's like 3 years off the game system just seems a bit crazy. It seems too far out to make any real sense, other than for them to sit in a court of law and say, see, we are working on something. You know, I think we'll see something. I think it'll be reasonable for Games Workshop to, you know, produce a system, you know, of the ilk of Heresy, which allows people to go back and play it. And, you know, what's interesting about Heresy and 40k, of course, is they play very similar. One's, you know, they're an edition apart, but, you know, that was random chance more than, or rather, that was to do with far too much commitment to the current system for the Heresy players to move on to 8th edition. So there they remained in 7th for some time. You know, what are they going to do? What are they going to change in terms of format? The temptation is to say, well, it's just going to be Age of Sigmar, but you can play your old armies in old scenarios and old campaigns and those kind of things. I don't think that's what they're saying. I think you're going back to a rank and file system to a degree. So is it going to be Age of Sigmar in terms of stats? So you still, you know, 3 up, 4 up, etc., and Battle Shop and all the rest of the mechanics work exactly the same, but there is an advanced, just like you get battles in cities and, you know, those kind of things. Essentially, it becomes almost like a realm set of rules which dictate, you know, how you move rank and file, you know, and how that affects Battle Shock or how that affects charges. You get additional bonuses or something like that. So maybe it's just going to be a slight divergent break from the current system, which allows for rank and file movement and some benefit for doing so, because otherwise, why do it unless there was a kind of benefit for doing it? Or they're just going to, you know, launch Fantasy 9th edition if they feel that not enough people crossed over from Fantasy to you know, from Fantasy to Age of Sigmar. But again, with all of that 3 years off, any real speculation at this time feels like, you know, a little bit of a exercise in futility, isn't it? Nobody really knows. I think I'm a bit surprised if people at Games Workshop really know. They're probably just sat down there scratching stuff on tables now, saying, why don't we do this? So we'll find out. We'll find out in 3 years' time, and no doubt we'll hear more somewhere along the line as well. But I think it's a little bit early to start. Well, it's definitely too early to start burning your Age of Sigmar models. I do disagree with the kind of sentiment that, oh well, you know, that's proof that Sigmar failed, etc. I don't think that's the case at all. You know, Sigmar's you know, it depends where you live, but in some areas Sigmar's a well-established, well-played game. So I don't think that's anything to do with that. That's not about them going back to Fantasy because Sigmar didn't work out. I think that's people just, you know, wanting to state that. I think the other thing, the other driver that might be going off, of course, is Heresy, of course, is reached terror. It's come to an end, and, you know, all you can do is start moving, like, backwards in the timeline now. So you get to the end, you get to terror, and then what do? Turn around and go back? You know, you know, so to a degree, it is actually the idea of exploring the old world, Forge Worlds, quite literally Forge Worlds' next Heresy. A place to go where they can build models, where they can go back to the Bretonnian armies, they can go back to Tomb Kings, maybe reimagine them slightly, or, you know, so you can kind of, or maybe just build upon those armies so you can kind of use them again and those kind of things, and introduce characters, kind of like what you get with The Hobbit to a degree. You know, they don't put a hell of a lot into rank and file, but what you do get is a lot of really cool characters being introduced on a fairly steady stream that have an impact in the game. And I get it's a different game system, you know, I know it plays differently and it's focused around character, but so that's where I sit. A lot of speculation, no idea whatsoever. Some of it's just, well, it feels like it's an IP, you know, a kind of a reinforcement of intellectual property. The other thing says maybe it's a path forward for Forge World, and the other thing is why not? You know, you've got Titanicus. That doesn't mean 40k failed. If you want to play Titans, you can do Titanicus, Necromunda, blah 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 blah. You know, is it going to be kind of like a specialist game almost, with like a bunch of extra rules you play on top of Age of Sigmar, which enables you to do rank and file? My guess is probably that. Okay, what's in the chat? I've either upset a bunch of people or gone nuts. A rule set with movement trays than new rangers, says Derpimus Maximus. What do we got here? Actually, I'm just going to go back. I wish I could have gotten a box set. I think we're probably talking about Sisters of Battle there. Get down the shop on Saturday, you never know. It might just happen. Could be fun, but it was never really fancy before in the end times. Kind of feel that it will be mostly a rule set with movement traces. Derpimus is also going on. They'll be selling free cities, whatever it is. Dave says my biggest worry is the scale of the new minis. It's interesting, isn't it? I've not got a lot of painting done in the last 10 minutes. I'm going to swap palette and try and do some painting as well while we chat through that. So let's do that as well while we have a look at that. Yeah, I know what you mean by scale, but Jack recently started, strangely enough, before the book came out, but he started Cities of Sigmar army, or was it Free Peoples at the time? And you know what? They look okay. They look okay. I don't think you kind of feel it too bad at all. I thought it was telling, or that it was telling that there wasn't a Total War Age of Sigmar. Yeah, although interestingly enough, I'd heard talk of a Total War Age of Sigmar, but you never know. Probably not, because you know you've got a feeling there's a whole bunch of people who play Total War without any real, you know, attachment, if you like, to the model side of it. So, you know, they wouldn't be interested in Age of Sigmar at all. I hope there is Age of Sigmar and crossover for the minis. Yeah, well, yeah, why not? I don't see why not, but maybe not, because you know you do see sometimes, especially like in Heresy, for instance, you get some Heresy models crossing over, but you don't get you know, lots of them crossing over. Right, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try a Space Wolves Grey and see what this looks like. This is really clunky, this colour, isn't it? Has anybody tried it before? Doesn't seem to behave like it. You know what, though? It looks quite nice as a flesh tone. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, okay. I quite like that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As I said, the idea of taking all of my gauze in different directions might be the way to go. I'm still not decided whether you kind of just go down that route and make them all look like that, but you just think 80 dudes in a single colour scheme feels like I've missed an opportunity. This is interesting. I wonder what happens if you take that into one of these, as far as I can see, a purple, but bear in mind, only because I am reading that off the bottle. Because to me, that's as pink can be. So this would be the flesh. This would be the fur. Okay. Don't know. Not so keen on that. I'm really struggling with this. Are you sure that's purple, guys? It says purple on the packet. I mean, bear in mind I can't see purple, so I'm hardly an authority, but that looks so pink to me. I'm going to try this purple because it might be something that I would consider as purple. And then we'll catch up with the chat and see where people are at. You see, to me, that's more like a purple, although it is absolutely horrendous in terms of its coverage. That's terrible, isn't it? As in, it's too dark for me. Maybe not. Maybe if you were going to highlight up from there. The problem is, I've noticed with this contrast stuff, is you really have to kind of you can't overjudge it at first. You need to let it dry, and then it starts to come out. I'm just going 25, 30% with that purple. And you know what? I'm going to try that flesh what we tried with that flesh before, that weird, was it the Space Wolf grey? That feels like a foolish move now, but we'll do it. Just see what happens. Oh, there wasn't enough of that left anyway. Let's have a quick jab, and then we'll catch up with the chat. I've just seen Coleman's comment of what if Luke swapped labels on all your bottles. I wouldn't put it past him. It's the kind of thing Luke would do and laugh about it. I'm flooding that on basically because I want to kind of see how well it blends between the two, but that's definitely going to have to be one of those that dries, because you get such a strong contrast going off on there. I mean, I just want to bring back this fellow because this is the one we did right at the start, and as you can see, a lot of that in terms of blending from the green into the flesh look. I mean, there's a good example of where I think it works quite well. Another good example is, I think, where you've got this kind of bluey green. By the way, on camera it's a lot bluer. It's coming out really green on the preview, but for me, sorry, not on camera it's a lot greener. For me, there's a bit of blue in there. Yeah. I'm half tempted to just have a stab at one of the Ongors just to see what that would look like. Okay, we're going to need to borrow this. I'm going to need to go with the Dark Oath. I need the Dark Oath. And we also add... I'm sure I toned that down 50-50. So I'll go with 2 drops of that. And then... Oh, I wish I could rewind the camera. We definitely had the Ethermatic Blue, which was raw, so that was straight out the bottle. And then I think it was the Achelian Green, wasn't it? But I'm wondering if there's a blue that I can... A Leviathan Blue, maybe. Space Marine Blue feels like it's going to be... The Ultramarine Blue is going to be too much. And the Space Wolf Grey really didn't work. Come on then. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. Let's see what happens, because we're getting towards the end of the show anyway. And we'll see where we go. Let's just get that Dark Oak flesh going. Got a hand up there. Real. I mean, by the way, it of course is worth mentioning that I've gone with the grey for these as the undercoat, not... I'm just going to drop that in there. Not the more yellowy colour. I can't remember the name of it now. And the reason I did that is I kind of want them to look somewhat unwell. You know, they are being kind of mutated by chaos. So, kind of figure, you know, that's not going well for them, is it? Okay. I'm going to get that in that face, because that's going to be all... Ultimately, that's going to be all metallics, but I'd rather have the shadow around the edge of the armor. Okay, let's get a bit of this going, because I want to kind of get, as I said, this is kind of like I think a mid color on these more. They're not bald, but they're meant to be like a smoother fur. That's what I'm gonna. That's what I'm telling myself anyway. I think I can kind of go right down to the top of that fur, over his hoof, and I'm going to do his butt cheeks. He's got little butt cheeks. And then I'm going to introduce a bit of this colour just into some areas of the torso. Let's see how that's looking. Go to the top of that fur there. And then... I quite like that. That's better. Just need a bit of contrast back in there. Quite literally contrast, which is good because it's called contrast paint. And then what happens if I just go with that blue blending into the top of the leg there? See, it kind of makes more sense now I'm doing the actual model, but it's always good to experiment on something you don't mind getting wasted, because otherwise you can have some nasty surprises when you create a new scheme. So I've got to get that blue onto this fur running up his back. And I've noticed Gonna have to come back in and sort his butt cheeks out. And I want to just do that fur along the bottom of his hoof and up the back of his heel. And we'll see. I'll tell you what we'll do is we're going to let this guy dry while we catch up on the chat. And we'll see where we get to. I need to do a bit of blending back in that. That's gone pretty terribly wrong at places. Okay, let's get a little bit of just the medium in this last pot. Flick that guy out of the way, drop that in there, so I've got to work quite quick because I don't want this to dry. I'm just going to kind of almost do a little bit of a wet blend with the contrast. I just want to get rid of that. I'm just going to have to accept the fact his butt cheeks ended up a little bit darker than I wanted. That's not the end of the world, is it? I don't think it is. Push that dart back down the leg. Okay. Feels like I need a little bit more ethematic blue along that lower torso, because I want him to kind of feel a little bit, his colours shifting slightly. So let's just get that back in there. But I'm, at the moment, this is feeling like my preferred colour scheme. I quite like that. So it's just, it's flesh. It's not only this fur growing over him, but where the fur is growing over him, his flesh is changing a little bit as well. Look, he's just getting a little bit of zeechiness going off. There you go. How does that look? I mean, bear in mind that, like I say, in some instances what I'll do is go over a second time for a little bit more contrast. I think really it's unfair to ask you to judge it, and it's unfair for me to judge it at this stage, because the reality is we need to just simply put it to one side and see how well it dries. But what I am going to do is just, I want a little bit more darkness to that fur. There you go. I quite like the little dark fur boots on the feet. I think that's kind of cute. I do also want, I've got a feeling it's terrifying using this stuff. It always feels like you're putting way too much on, but it just dries away to nothing, doesn't it? Okay. Just got to touch up a little bit there. Not happy with a little bit of blending that's gone on there. Let's get some dark earth back on. Oh, that's better. Alright. Looking a bit poorly, but you know. Pull it off of that. There you go. So I didn't talk a lot there, but I was just painting. And again, the whole point of this is when that's dry, I need to see what he looks like. And the point is that going to work for, you know, if I'm not doing 80 of them like that, I'm definitely doing, you know, 20 of them like that. You know, quite like the idea of introducing the blue up to his chin. So it's kind of coming along. There's a little bit there. Look. You put that in there like that. Just in that shadow. There you go. A little bit of blue in with the flesh. And then of course I can paint the highlights on. And I can experiment with doing the blue higher and lower on the abdomen. So in some instances they, you know, almost completely turn blue, and there's just a fleshy head. Or just less, going through to paler. And that's the thing, I think just on that one colour scheme there, I could probably do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 variants or something like that. But that feels like it's kind of in the right direction. I do like going back, by the way, I don't know whether you guys use contrast like this, but just as that interim layer is drying, just putting an extra shadow in a couple of places while it's still sort of semi-wet. And you can kind of get away with just putting that extra little bit of definition on the shadow if it missed. Okay, let's stick him to one side. I want to see what he looks like when he's dry. Again, bear in mind I need to do 80 of these. So it's by no means, you know, this is not what the army is going to be like. Can I see if you can get a different lighting view? Doesn't really work, does it? So let's not worry about that. What I'll do is I'll post up some pictures on the community site of the schemes when they dried, just so people can kind of pass judgment / feedback. I have to say, looking down on that model as he's drying, I quite like the idea that you kind of look down on them and they've got that very human feel to the gauze. So the gauze are the idea that the Tzeentch ones are the change fray. So I kind of like the least blessed of them have retained their most humanity. So gauze being the least best, still quite human looking. And then if you go from gauze from ungauze to gauze, you're kind of getting more bestial. And then I have done a conversion of a bestigore, which interestingly enough, if I can get to it, give me a second, guys. Let's show this. Bestigore was interesting because when you actually take a bestigore and then sculpt out the rear of the neck to make room for the actual Zangor head, then bestigores ended up looking like really hench armoured Zangors, basically. So it's interesting to kind of see how the bestigore... What I want to do is mess with the armour a little bit. So I'm going to get a little bit more Zangor kind of armour, and you do get some spare Zangor legs and the armor plates off the legs. So I'm only having like a unit of 10 bestigores anyway, so I'm just gonna get some of the Zangor armor plates over the legs and shoulders and stuff. But I do like how you've just got these two, super tough looking Zangors, and that's a kind of an experimental axe. Probably won't last, I don't know. I'm just trying to go with something that, a large axe that kind of matches that aesthetic really, so you can see what I'm trying to achieve. But I'm 50-50 on that at the moment. It's just a test model. Catch up with the chat, and I wish I'd popped out the chat so I could see it much easier. Maybe I could try it now, but it just feels so risky. It kind of worked. Okay, let's catch up with the chat. I can see the chat here now. Right. What if loot swap labels? I think we've got that one. My brother started painting his old dwarves a few years ago, stalled a bit, and when his kid arrived, he's got going by 3rd edition army books. About 150 points now. How cool is that? Oh, sorry, 1,500 points. Even better. What have we got? A bunch of Martin Dicks chatting to Coleman, I think, there. Oh, almost nothing for me. This is refreshing. On the camera, it pulls really dark in the recesses. Yes, it does, and it doesn't look like that. And I mean, particularly, I'll tell you what, we'll go back to the difference between, say, that. You get an idea of how that actually in many respects probably needs a second coat, if you know what I mean, to bring it back into. So and this one's come out somewhat different because I kind of pushed the blue a little bit more. I really wanted that blue fur on him, basically. So we'll see. I'll put some photos up because it is showing quite contrasty. Bear in mind that I've got to design a technique that is going to successfully paint 80 of them. That's my main concern, because I really need to get the whole massive block of 80 done. There's a unit of 40 with sword and shield. There's 2 units of 10 raiders with bow. And then there's there's a unit with spear and shield, a 10-man unit of spear and shield, and then a second 10-man unit of spear shield, which actually isn't Ungors. They are wizards tied to stakes, because they are going to be sacrificed next to my headstone. Where are we going? Using cities. I bet the wizard attack frog isn't in it. Probably not. Anyway, that looks like a bunch of old school Warhammer Fantasy chat going off in there. Last time we actually did any gaming, we played Hero Quest, so we're a bit out of the loop in that sense. Nice one. Okay, where are we at now? Right. I like it better than the start. Okay, thank you very much, man. Thanks, Vaughn. Someone giving me some feedback. I appreciate that. What's in the list? Oh, we can talk about that for a lit. I heard the rumour that Seraphon are getting a new battle tome in January, February 2020. No comment. It's in the Tzeentch Facebook group, confirmed. Oh, comment. Why would Seraphon get in the Tzeentch Facebook group, confirmed? Anyway, that's confusing. I thought the official rumour was January, Feb is KO and Tzeentch. Tzeentch could get a battle tome in January, says the Demon Lizard. I started to dislike batch painting and mass armies. Painted a lot of Skaven. That's enough minis for me. It can break you for sure. I think you just have to approach them with a healthy attitude of saying, they've got to look good when you put 20 or 30 of these things down. They don't have to look good individually when you pick up each one. That's what your heroes are for, and I think if you can kind of just accept that and move on, you know, then that looks okay. I'm not, yeah, for, yeah. At the moment, I'm sort of sitting looking at this, watching it dry. It's getting better for sure as it dries. It's a little bit too fleshy, but maybe that's what's going to make my Ungor stand out, you know, because I have gone to all the trouble of converting every single Ungor. So if you can't see the fleshy muscles, maybe they simply don't work if you can't see them like that. I do quite like that blue. It is very green though. I'll have to have a think about that. How far off of... That's a good point. We'll use that as a reference point in short. Where do we at? Oh, what's in the list? Right, okay then. Well, there's a couple of lists. There's a 1,000 point list, you know, or thereabouts, because this list is morphic at best. There's which is for a doubles army in June. I think it's June. Is the doubles tournament. And then there's a 2,000 point list for battle reports, which I'm working on. And of course, there's probably about another 1,000 points of summonable units. So it's about 3,000 points in total that make the model. The 1,000 point list, and again, this is more or less, so this isn't accurate. You can fit this in 1,000 points, but it's the kind of, I want to get these units done and then decide some of them may or may not have to be summoned, etc. But your base, you know, your base core is, you know, somewhere in the lines of 20 Zangors. And then, you know, some supporting Ungors to get me the battle line. So 2 units of 10, possibly Ungors, which gives me, you know, the Herdstone sacrificial one. I want to get a Zangor Shaman in there, so on disc. And I'm converting one of those up right now. So the disc is converted and the Shaman is converted. Then it's either Beast Lord or the Doom Bull. One of those two, depending. Doom Bull's a bit expensive. He's good for what he is, but the Beast Lord gets the re-roll saves of 1, which is always really nice when you've got the, say, the Gave Spawn ability, you know, which kind of, you know, harms you on rolls of 1, when you don't really have to worry about that when you're re-rolling those ones. What else is in there? At that basic level, like I say, really what you're looking at, of course, a couple of, one Bray Shaman. So you're probably looking at a Zangor Shaman, a Bray Shaman, a Doom Bull, or rather definitely a Beast Lord. And then, you know, 2 units of Ungors, strength 10, etc., etc., you know, around that, 10 or 20 if I can get them in, followed by 20 Zangors. And of course then I do need a couple of Chaos Spawns, because it's going to be, although it's Twist Fray doesn't actually have any faction rules, so I'm going to be basing it on Gave Spawn, because I like the idea of these, you know, little beasts of chaos, spawn of chaos, following up from behind, Chaos Spawn boosting the units and stuff. So that's the plan. Am I running this at the doubles then? Yes, definitely. I'm running it at the doubles. So this army is for the doubles tournament, which I really need to get done. I'm also possibly showing up to the Throne of Skulls in February, the escalation tournament, because I just like the look of that. And I'll be taking Fire Slayers to that, because I only need to paint 1 unit for that. So I've got between now and February to paint. Admittedly, the unit I'm painting is some heavily converted Dracolines. So there's still a lot of conversion work to be done to these Dracolines, but you get the idea. They are going to be Fire Slayer-esque Dracolines. And instead of Stormcast Eternals riding on the back of them, they will be Stormcast Eternals in terms of the game. So they're an ally, but the reality is they will have little Fire Slayer Princelings, or Rune Grandsons, we're jokingly calling them at the moment, riding on the back of them. But as you can see, a lot of bulk work still. The bulk work's kind of been done. Got rid of all the detail, but there's a bunch of sanding and smoothing and filing, and then a final coat of green stuff, and get some of these scale textures back on across the flanks, and then a little custom throne saddle for the Rune Grandsons to sit on. So that's going off for the February game, so I need to get that unit done plus my little character which I showed last week. He's completed. So that's my commander. If you're not familiar with the tournament, the way it works is you all get a commander which has got like a 6-inch move and a bunch of steady attacks, and a 4-up ignore of all wounds. So it's a nice little character, but then you can choose one of 6 powers to make him unique for your army. So this is a Rune Lord. It's a heavily converted Rune Lord, which I was working on to join my Fire Slayers to give me some defense from magic. But in this instance, he's also going to be turned into a crazy little wizard. Although he's not actually a wizard, he's going to be just channeling a bit of Azurite magic through his Master Rune there. There you go. Where's the Sisters of Battle box sets when I need one? Where's the Sisters Battle box set? I don't know. I didn't get one. I'm kind of Sisters. I'm semi interested in them, but right now I'm doing a lot of Age of Sigmar. I think I will be interested in them at some point, but initially, what I'm going to do is wait for the rush to be over, because it'll all be out. It will come again soon, won't it? That's the main thing. Right, where are we? 10:05. Let's call it a night, folks. What I'm going to do is I'll post up a bunch of stuff. Let's do a quick close-up on this, because it is drying, so can you kind of see? Very contrasty, but you get the idea. I'll post some pictures up so you guys have got an idea how that's working out. I wouldn't be too upset if, 20, 30 of the Ongors had that scheme going. I don't think... Yeah, you know what? Even the pinky ones kind of worked out. Definitely not with the bluey green, but they definitely worked out flesh into pink. So maybe you could do some like that and some like that. That would look okay. That would actually look okay, wouldn't it? Because you get the kind of pink and blue of Tzeentch going off, and that really works for my army. So maybe it's about doing variations of those, where some of them have the pink almost all the way up to the top of the head, some of them have the blue almost all the way up to the top of the head, and then some have kind of flesh coming down. And maybe the idea of bringing flesh down into brown fur, and then just kind of a little bit of colour at the feet, as if it's a slight change that's going on. Right, one last catch up with the chat, and let's call it that spawn looks great. I missed earlier. How did that get done? Oh, right, okay, so very quickly, it is the Flesh Eater Court's Big Beasties. Can't remember what they're called, but that's essentially where the front arms... No, I tell a lie. Every now and then, one of the arms was from the Flesh Eater Court Crypt Horrors. But every now and then the double arms were from the Pink Horror set. Yeah, why not? The Pink Horror spares. So you can see an extra little arm from Pink Horror. So I did sacrifice a box of Pink Horrors to make this happen. Pink Horrors gave me the faces. Bear in mind this paint scheme isn't finished. It was a rush job for a tournament. We're going to get the metals back in there and work on the highlights a little bit more and those kind of things, and get some of this fur back into the pink, rather than just didn't get a chance to kind of revisit some of those, so you get the idea. And as you can see, I missed some bits. Shocking, really. Shocking, but they were all done about 2 nights out from a tournament. So that's what that's going to look like. You know what? When you kind of put him next to him, actually, in hindsight, he's looking a little bit green, isn't he? So I'm going to need to rework this with pushing a little bit more the blue, I think. So there's more experimentation to be done, for sure. But at the same time, I don't think he looks too dreadful alongside that. If a bunch of those are running in, and then you've got this crazy chaos spawny thing chasing them along, going, move faster and have more attacks. That'd work. For me, it does anyway. Vlad says, Demon Lizard from Outer Space. Nice Rune Lord conversion are one of the greatest parts of the hobby. I love conversions, for sure. They're definitely the greatest part of the hobby. In fact, I'm going to do a show just on the idea of creative freedom by adding conversions to your army, particularly exploring the possibility of allied units from other decks, where you can create, like, the Fire Slayer Dracolines, for instance, and they're called the magma lines or something like that, or the Dracodrophs. Not quite sure at the moment. Prefer the green. Could combine. I like the plumage of the bird of paradise. Thank you very much. Sleep well. Okay, it's almost translucent. I like the pigs of deep sea creatures that have their own bioluminescence. Yeah, good point, actually, yeah. Okay, right. That's it. We're all done. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, guys. Really much appreciated. It's good to see you guys back on the chat. And it's nice to be back as well. So I think we can call it a night of that, folks. And I'll see you next week. Cheers, then. Bye.